Okay, so you want to add a picture to your application, and you want to get that picture by way of using the camera. So we're going to build a real basic demo here of getting your app to access the camera. Now, one good thing about doing this in the emulator is that we can emulate snapping a picture with the camera. It's better if you can test this on a device, but I know not everybody has a device to be able to work with. So this is what our app will do, and I've just made it into landscape, so a lot of people tend to take their cameras and turn it to the side into landscape mode when they're ready to take a picture. But this will work in both portrait or landscape. So we're going to have a button in our app, and when we click that, it's going to start the camera application. Right, so this is going to go in. We have our camera application with some of the different tools and settings in there. But we're going to snap a picture. Now it looks like nothing actually happened on here. And again, this is just the way the emulator is going to work. But then when I tap OK, it's going to take us back to our application. And this is our simulated image that it took a picture of. So we have our little Android guy. So what our interface is going to look like is we'll have a button that is going to call the camera action to open up the camera application. It's going to snap a photo, take that image, put it back here. This is a image view, so we'll be able to take the result of our image and put it into an image view. So to get started, I'm going to create a new project in Eclipse. Okay, so I've created a new project, and the only thing that I've changed on it so far is the strings XML. I added a couple of strings for one for the button and revised the app name. So that's the only change that I've made so far. So I'm going to start by opening up the Main XML and setting up our layout. Right, and as I said, I'm going to change mine to landscape because a lot of people do tend to turn their phones to the side like they would a digital camera. But this, again, will work in portrait or landscape mode. So I'm going to put in a button, and I'm going to set up the property on that button to use a string. And I'm also going to give it an ID. Let's call this take photo. And the text string, instead of button, I have some button text in here called take photo. So when we're going to set this up with an Onclicklistener so that when this happens, that is going to start the intent to open up the camera app. And when the camera app takes a picture, we want to take the result and put it back on our screen. So I'm going to add an image view. And right now, for temporary placement purposes, I'm just going to use the launcher icon. And I'm going to set this up so that it expands the full height and width of the remaining part of my app. So I'm going to save that Main XML. I'm going to give this a name. So instead of image view 1, I'm just going to call it image view. Okay, and so that completes setting up the user interface. Since our application is going to require using a camera, we want to make sure that a camera is available on the device. And so one way of doing that is by going into the manifest file and setting it up so that it'll only be available to devices that have camera support. So if we go into the manifest file, and I'm just going to go into the XML, and under where we have our uses section, I'm going to add in the uses feature for Android hardware camera. Now, this does not guarantee that the app will never be installed on a device without a camera, even if it absolutely is required by the app. If you publish your app only through the Android market, only users with devices with a camera will be able to see your app. But that doesn't necessarily stand true for other markets. So keep that in mind when designing. There are some other ways in your code that you can verify and check to see if the device has a camera. But the first way of preventing users without camera support is to be able to include this into your manifest file. I'm finished with the manifest file, and next I'm going to go into my Java file, my main Java file, and we have the standard setup that's going to load the main XML file. So one of the first things we're going to do is to get a reference to the button so that when the button is clicked, it's going to start the camera application. Okay, so I'm just going to say it's a button, and I'm going to call it BTN for short, and that is equal to the find view by ID, and the name of the button is take photo, and I need to import in button, and then I need to cast this all to a button. So now that we have a reference to the button, we want to set an Onclicklistener to it like we've done in other examples before. So I'm going to say set Onclicklistener, and this is a new Onclicklistener, and it's going to create the anonymous inner type, and I need to import in the Onclicklistener, and I need to add a semicolon at the end of that line, and I'm going to get rid of this comment. So in this onClick is where we define what we want to have happen when the button is clicked. So in this case, we want to start a new intent that will start the camera. So this is intent, and I'm just going to call our intent, and I'm going to import this in. And in the parentheses, we're going to specify the intent that we want to open. In other words, the application. So this is Android Provider Media Store. It's Action Image Capture. So we've created the intent, and now we have to start the activity. Now in this case, we're going to revisit the concept of starting an activity for result. So we don't want to just go out to the activity. We want to get something back from the activity that we're starting. So in that case, we use start activity for result. And the activity that we're going to start is our intent that we just created. And then we have our request code. So I'm just going to give the request code set as 0. So that will start our activity. And then we have to build in what should happen with our activity result. So we have to add in our onActivityResult method. Okay, so I just pasted the rest of this in here. So we have our onActivityResult, and we have our request code and result code and our intent that's going to return some data back. So when the button is clicked, it's going to start the camera with a result, and the onActivityResult, we define what should happen when we get that result back. So we want to check and make sure, first of all, that we are getting something back. So we're going to say if request code is equal to 0, which is what we set up here, right? This is our request code. So if the request code is equal to 0, then we'll say what we want it to do. Now we need to get the bitmap, which is our result. So we're going to use bitmap, and we're going to call it the image, and that equals a bitmap and data. Data is returned as our extra, so data.getExtras, and get, and what we want to get specifically in as our key is data. And I need to import in bitmap. And then the last thing we need to do is to get the result of this and put it into our image view in our user interface. First of all, we need to get a reference to the image view. So I'm going to come up here right after our activity begins, and I'm going to put it up here because we need to access it down in this onActivityResult. So that means if I put it up in here, it's going to be available everywhere in our class. So we're going to say image view, and I need to import in image view. And we want to get a reference to that image view from our user interface. So I'm going to say, let's call this, well, we have IV equals, and then we'll do find view by ID, and this is our ID, and I called it ImageView, and then I need to add a cast to ImageView. So we have a reference to our ImageView, and now we need to take the image and put that into our ImageView. So we'll say ImageView IV.setImageBitmap. And inside here, the name of the image, which is the image. So now if I save everything, I think I have all the steps completed, so I'm going to test this in my emulator. Okay, and so now if I do take photo, that should launch the camera. Take our picture. Even though it looks like nothing's there, we're still going to click OK, and we come back, and there is our little Android guy. So if you take this and you do have a device available that you can test on, when you get into here and you take a photo, then of course it's going to take an actual picture and put it back into your ImageView. So that's the basics of launching the camera application and snapping a photo.